All right. Good morning, everybody. By request from yesterday, and some people have asked about the foreclosure process, how to handle them, how to avoid them from a buyer perspective and a seller perspective. So we're going to handle this from a seller side first, right? What is a foreclosure? How to avoid it? And short sales is one of the ways to avoid foreclosures, right? Okay. So in California, and we're only going to specifically talk about California. Okay. In California, there's a process. Okay. So when does it start? Of course, when people start to become late, that starts the foreclosure process technically, right? What is the foreclosure process? Basically, this is when the bank is going to start to repossess, just like if you get your car repossessed, right? Okay. Because when you borrow money from the bank, you're giving the right for the bank to start the foreclosure process so they can liquidate the property and get you paid. Okay. Again, it is only so the funds are used to pay off the bank. And if there's any balance left over, that's going to go to back to the owners. Okay. So again, the foreclosure process is only a reason for them to liquidate the property. Okay. So when does that begin? Right? It begins usually when the client is about 3 to 6 months, sometimes even 12 months behind, and they will the beginning part is what we call the notice of default. Okay, when a notice of default, what we call NOD, is filed against the property, right? Okay, well, once it's that's basically it's day zero. Okay, some people call it day one, but it's day zero. Once it's filed, today start the clock. Okay, so in California, you'll hear about 3 months and 21 days is the minimum. Okay, so what we'll discuss that a little bit later. I'll show you guys a quick chart that you guys can have as a reference. Okay, so just remember 3 months and 21 days. Okay, so a notice of default is filed today. Okay, there are other things that happens between now and 3 months. Okay, we'll just use 90 days. Okay, which is technically 3 months. Okay, after 3 months or 90 days, the bank will file a notice of sale date. Okay, so notice of default, day zero, just like anything else, 90 days, notice of sale date. This is when the bank will now say, hey, we're gonna, you know, liquidate this asset at the courthouse steps or however they're going to do their auction. Usually it's in the county courthouse steps in California. Okay. And this is where we'll talk about later how buyers can bid on those. So after the 90 days, 21 days later, minimum, the bank or the trustee can start the auction. Okay. Sometimes it's like between 21 to 30 days after the 90 days. Okay. But the timelines is minimum 90 days. So basically what happens from the notice of default to the 90 days, which is the sale date posting. Okay. The borrower, the buyer, or technically the seller, right, who's the owner now, the owner can save the property from being a sold at the county courthouse steps, okay, within that 90 days. They can cure it. They can pay back anything that is in arrears, any behind payments, or they can work out a loan modification to stop the sale date. Okay, up so from the notice of default to 90 days, you have the right to work out something with the bank. The bank can't say no, or remember, the bank does not want to liquidate or they want to take the property back. Okay, so again, after so many months of being behind, a bank will file a notice of default. Right, 90 days later, notice of sale. 21 days later, there'll be a sale, or what we call a trustee sale. Okay, so these are terminologies that I'll give you guys some places to look for these, and I will also send by tomorrow the recording for this and also some resources. Okay, just in case you guys don't go out there and get the information. All right, so that's basically the timeline in California. Right, once you're behind on payments, the bank will say, hey, you haven't been contacting us, you haven't worked out anything. We're gonna start the foreclosure process. They're gonna file a notice of default day zero. 90 days later, they will file a notice of sale. Okay, so until that 90 days, the owner, borrower, seller, however you want to call it, they have the right to catch up and save the house. Okay, through loan modification or whatever you want to do. After 21 more days after, boom, the bank does not have to take any of the money. So between that 90 days and that extra 21 days for the posting or before the auction date, the bank can say, nope, we don't want your money. We're going to send this to sale because we already started the process and we don't want to save it. We want to liquidate. Okay. So again, that first 90 days is critical. Now, that's the foreclosure process. It's pretty simple. Now, why do you want to avoid foreclosure? Because typically that'll stay in your record, in your credit report for about 7 to 10 years, right? Now, can you get a loan after a year? Sure. You can reestablish credit, okay? You can, because sometimes people get in a bad position. Again, there's different reasons why you go through foreclosure, right? Bottom line is you weren't able to pay the mortgage. So now the bank says, hey, we want our money. You borrowed this money. We want it. If you can't, we're going to liquidate. Now, several things can happen, right? Loan modification is common. They borrow money from somewhere else. They probably cannot refinance with a new bank unless they get like a hard money loan or something, but that's not good. So usually the bank, the current lender, will try to do a loan modification. Okay, because like I said, they don't want the house back because after 3 months and 21 days, the property gets sold in auction. This is where investors will bid, right? Usually the starting bid is whatever the balance is owed. Okay, so if a property has a loan balance of, let's say, $1 million, that will be the minimum bid. And then if the house is worth 2 million, people will start to bid above that, right? Remember, if the loan amount to pay off is only $1 million after all the fees, anything above 1 million will go back to the owner. Okay, but usually the investors don't really bid way over the current loan amount because they want to try to make as much money as possible. But some investors will have different profit margins, and we'll talk about that later as a borrower. I mean, as a buyer of these auction homes. Okay, so if there's no bidding, let's say there's not enough potential equity or profit for investors, then the bank ends up taking the house back, and that's what we call an REO, real estate owned, what we call bank owned properties. Okay, that's when no one bids it at the county courthouse. Okay, usually what that means is the house is over encumbered or the house owes more than the current value of the property. Okay, so that's how that works. Okay, so as an owner, typically, right, they will get that notice of default. Now, as some of you guys know, in our offices, if you're not in our, if you're in our, 6 offices, we send a copy of what we call the foreclosure list. Okay, in that list, there will be a list called the pre-foreclosure. Basically, these are the people that have a notice of default filed. Okay, there's a sale notices where there's a notice of sale that happens, and then there's one called REO or bank loan where the trustee sale has actually happened. So there's 3 parts. So as a agent, as a listing agent, I want to get those notice of default people, okay? Because that means it started. We have until the trustee sale date to, posting to try and save the property. Okay. So let's pretend, Dulat is the owner, right? I notice he has a notice of default. Now, foreclosureradar.com is one of the resources we get this. Okay, there's different companies who provide this list, but we use Foreclosure Radar. Okay, Gorette sends this out to our offices, right, to our agents, and you guys get this list at least once a month, if not more often, right? So she runs it. You guys get the list. You look for it. Notice of default filings, right? They'll have a filing date. That starts the 90-day clock. Okay, and usually we would contact those sellers and say, hey, my name's Greg. I'm a local realtor. I'm looking for potential sellers who might want to sell their property. Have you thought about selling their property? Right? Some of them, they don't want to sell it because they want to try and save it. So they'll probably say, oh, we're not selling. Okay, great. So now how do you start that conversation that you know that there's a notice of default? You can create a letter. Like there are people who write a letter, postcard to people who have filed a notice of default. They're getting mailers. Trust me. Once a notice of default is filed, there are investors out there that says, hey, we'll buy your house at any condition. We'll give you money, right? Basically, these are what we call distressed sellers. Okay, so when that happens, people are like either they become like an ostrich, meaning they bury their head on the sand and they say, we don't want to listen, we don't want to listen, right? Or they'll say, well, yeah, tell me what you're talking about. Okay. So those are the extremes. People that says, I don't want to talk about it. There are then some say, hey, let me find a solution. So as agents, what is the benefit of we have? Okay. Well, we avoid foreclosure so we can save their credit. They'll have lates, but after being lates can go away or can have the negative impact typically lasts only about 12 months. When a foreclosure can last 3, 5, 7 years, 10 years later, possibly. Again, you can always recover from your credit being ruined by a foreclosure or bankruptcy. Okay, there are ways to do it. You just remember, the worse your credit is, the higher your interest rate is going to be. Okay, so just know that, right? So now, as agents, we talk to the seller, Dulat. Hey, Dulat, in doing research in the area, I noticed that there's a notice of default filed against your property. Were you aware of it? Sometimes they are aware or not, right? Sometimes mail gets lost, right? But usually it is sent registered mail and posted on their door, the notice of default. So they can't really miss it, right? Usually they'll say, oh, we worked it out with the bank. They're trying to hide from you, right? Or some people just don't want to tell people they're in distress, right? Or they're in the foreclosure process. And our in is, hey, we'd love to be able to save your credit by selling it the regular way rather than the bank taking the house back. Okay. Now, as agents, we should be able to tell them, hey, do you know the foreclosure process in California? We have a flyer for it, right? You can give it to them and you can explain it to them at least, right? Now, we're not giving advice. We're just telling them, hey, if you want to try and save your credit or any potential equity, we can do a regular sale. Because if they owe $1 million, the house is worth $2 million, it's good to just sell it the normal way, right? Because if it goes to auction in 3 months and 21 days, they may not be able to sell it for more than $1 million or so because the investors are not going to overpay that much. There are investors out there that says, hey, no one overbid on this property or something. They work out different deals, okay, these investors, right? So that's another story. We'll talk about that later. As an owner, as an agent, and we're talking to the owners, we're just saying, hey, would you like to save your equity? Because if it's worth $1 million, right, we can sell for 1.5, 1.7, and then they get the extra $700,000 or more, right? Again, just because someone is in default doesn't mean that's the end of the world, right? So as agents, we can do this is what we call the pre-foreclosure, right? Now, if you want to target people who have late mortgage payments, right, before the NOD is filed, you can contact different list companies, list brokers, okay, and get that list. People that have mortgage lates, okay? Talk to your lender about that. If you have a loan officer friend, ask them, hey, can you guys get a list of people that have mortgage lates? Okay, they should be able to. It costs money to do that. Just like it costs us, the company, money to have foreclosure radar to give you guys the monthly list of foreclosure trustee sales, and auction sales, right? Okay. So again, this costs money, but as a company in our offices, we provide this list so you guys can go after these potential sellers. Okay. So the best time to reach the sellers is before the NOD is set or before that sale date is, the 90 days. Within that NOD date, filing date, and that sale date, right, posting, the 90 days, that's the prime time, okay? You might be able to postpone the sale if you get an offer within that 90 days, right? But once that 90 days passes, most banks are saying, we don't want to talk to you anymore. But some of them, they'll talk to you even up to that 21-day limit when the actual auction date is happening. I've had that happen where we stopped the sale on that day because we were able to get a great offer, and the bank really just wants to liquidate. They don't want to go, you know, getting the property back, things like that. But again, each bank works differently. Okay, so there's some resources I will share with you guys later, and also on the recording. Right, by tomorrow, make sure you guys download the resources if you don't find the resources somewhere else. Okay, so that's how the foreclosure process works. Okay, we'll talk about short sales a little bit later. But is there anybody have any questions on the foreclosure process? Okay, remember,
Great.
NOD is filed 90 days and then 21 days. So you'll hear that. Okay. Yes. Question,
Let
Ali.
me ask you a question. That those actually mortgage companies, they are able to disclose their clients or their actually customers for the mortgage rates.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
I was gonna just mention that
Yeah.
by law they are able to actually, but we have to pay something to just get that list, right?
Correct. Yeah. You can contact Equifax and say, hey, who has mortgage rates in the last 3 to 6 months? They'll send it to you. Lists
Yeah.
are always you can always get them. Now the question is, will you have the phone number? Things like that, right? So again, there's always list of something. There's list brokers, right? Okay.
Right.
You want to find out who has a mortgage of this amount, who has this much credit score, all that stuff. You can buy these lists. There are many list brokers. You want a list of all doctors in Fremont? What type of doctor you want? What type of dentist? You can get all these list brokers. Okay. So talk to your title rep. Usually it's a good resource. Okay. If not, your lender, they buy lists all the time. Okay. So again, list getting the list before the NOD, you can buy those lists. But again, most of them they'll either if someone's a month behind, that's not a big deal. They can catch up, right? But
Right.
hey, you can contact them and hey, can I give you some info? You can give them information about the foreclosure, how to save your credit, things like that. Okay. So all right.
Thank
Is
you.
anybody have any questions on the NOD date,
And
the three
one,
months or 90 days, and the 21-day trustee sale date? So remember, everything starts from the notice of default, just like date of acceptance on the contract. Notice of default, 90 days, right? Is when we have the final walkthrough, right? And then 21 days is hey, it's done. We're done. You don't own the house. It's liquidated. We'll see what's happening, right? So in case you guys came late to the call, I'll be sending out a recording of this by tomorrow. If for some reason you don't get it, please let me know. Okay? You guys have my contact info for if there's any other resources. Please let me know. Okay? So questions on the foreclosure time frame. Remember, notice of default, 90 days, 21 days. Those are the minimum. It could be longer, but usually the bank will follow that pretty close. Okay? Because that's the timelines that the law allows them, and they have a process. Okay, good. So we're clear about the foreclosure process, right? Okay, let me share something with you guys. Okay. Remember, there's a lot of things that happen also, right? Yeah. Okay. So here's the timeline, right? You guys see this? Does everybody see this, right? So you guys see my screen, right? The
Yeah.
trustee timeline, right?
Yes.
So so you guys have heard of Orange Coast Title, right? Right? If you have not, I'm gonna send all these resources to you guys tomorrow. If you have Orange Coast Title, right? Some of the debt title companies will have this, but I use Orange Coast. They have great resources, right? So octitle.com, right? That's their website, right? OC Title, right? It's octitle.com, right? That's their website, okay? Right? So Orange Coast, okay? So if you don't have a rep yet, contact me and I'll connect you with somebody, right? But when you sign in, right, you'll get a user ID, right? 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 And then you log in, right? You guys see this, right? So Katie is my rep. You guys can contact her, right? If you don't have one, right? There's a place here where you can contact a rep, right? But most of us will have a contact rep. If not, like I said, you guys can take a picture of Katie and then you guys can call her, right? Tell her, Greg sent you, okay? If she's not in your market area, she'll connect you with somebody else, okay? Where it says more tools, right? You guys should get connected with OC Title, okay? The other title company, Fidelity, Chicago, all those other companies, they have some resources. Get connected with them too. But I believe Orange Coast Title has some good stuff, okay? So when you go to more tools, this document toolbox, you guys see that, right? Document toolbox, right? You guys see this foreclosure and short sale information? Yes or no? You guys see it?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. How many of you guys have ever been to this website? Okay. All right. So in here, right? When you click on it, you'll have all these handouts, right? Okay, so I want you guys to download this if you have it. If not, I'm going to attach this on my email tomorrow with the recording of today's class. Okay, but you guys should have OC Title's app, okay, or website. All you guys should have every title company's website, okay, because they all have different tools that you guys have access to at no cost, right? Eventually, you have to give them an escrow, otherwise they'll cut you off, right? So in here, right, this trustee timeline, right? This is what I'm talking about, right? So notice of default is filed, right? That's day 0. They call it day 1, right? Notice of default is filed, okay? Then 90 days later, right? As you can see here, where does this say 90 days? And yeah, so after this in 1 month, this is after 3 months, right? This is where until this 3 months, you have the seller has the right to renegotiate if the bank is willing to pay off the loan, or pay off the what's late to catch everything up, right? After 3 months, the bank can say, "Sorry, we already started the sale date. We don't want your money back. Either pay us all in full, or see you at the courthouse steps," right? So after that 3 months, this is where the 21 days happens, right? Usually, most banks will wait till like 30 days for the sale date, 28, 30 days for the sale date, because there are some things that they have to do, right? But the key there is the notice of default and the 3 months. That goes pretty clockwork. After the 3 months, the bank will do within 21 to 30 days the actual auction date. Once the auction date happens, this is where you hear people, "Oh, this is where you can bid at the courthouse steps." So as a buyer, if let's say Vicas wants to buy some, he'll get some people. Okay, one of these things that it has to be advertised. The notice of sale has to be advertised in the most convenient newspaper. So the local papers where usually they will post it, or they will advertise it for 3 weeks. Okay, the bank has to advertise it once a week for 3 weeks. The sale date. Okay, like I said, the minimum 21 days. Okay, so they'll within the first 30 days they'll after the first 90 days they will post a date in the future of at least 21 days to 30 days. Okay, so you can be reading the local newspaper, the Mercury, the Argus, whatever local paper you guys are reading, wherever the property is. So it has to be in the local paper. Okay, so if a property is in San Jose, they can't advertise it in the Chronicle. They have to advertise it at the Mercury, the San Jose Mercury, because that's the local paper. That will be in the public notices section of the newspaper. If you guys ever pick up a newspaper, look for the public notices. That's where they put death notices to, right? So you guys may want to check that. You might have a foreclosure or a death notice there for you, right? Right. So now let's say Vicas, he's a shrewd investor. He looks at the public notice. He says, "Oh, wow, there's a $2 million property, and the minimum bid's only $1 million." So Vicas goes to the county courthouse steps for that date, and he waits for the auctioneer to say, "Hey, we're auctioning this property, right? Minimum bid is $1 million. Vicas bids $1 million. Next thing he knows, oh, someone else goes 10%, bids another one, right? There's a bidding. There's a minimum bid up. Okay, it's not like, oh, $1 million $1, $1 million $2, $1 million $3. Okay, it's not that. Its minimum overbid is like usually 10% to 5 to 10% above the last bid. Okay, so now Vicas has to bring in a cashier's check for that amount, or usually they give you until the end of the day to pay off the auctioneer. Okay, so there are people out there who have money orders or cashier's checks. Okay, for that amount. Okay, now sometimes your client will call you. You know, hey Ali, I saw this public notice. There's my neighbor is selling. It's in foreclosure, and I can get it for only $300,000. Now you don't know if that's the first loan, second loan, third loan, fourth loan. You know there's a lender who's foreclosing. So you should do a preliminary title report to see what's recorded. All right. Remember, the recording is usually about 30 days behind. When you get a prelim, it's about 30 days behind. So you have to get an up to date preliminary title report, like timestamp it to yesterday. It can still happen that the preliminary title report will miss a recording, right? Because let's say the title company runs the recording research today at 10:30, and then someone records another note at 11 a.m. But the auction was at 10 o'clock. Okay, the buyer at the auction may be responsible for that new lien, possibly. Okay, this has happened to one of my clients. Right, there's a lien that somehow showed up that the bank, I mean the escrow company didn't see. Remember, when you get a preliminary title report, you don't have title insurance yet. You only have title insurance at closing, or there's a timeline. Okay, so there are sometimes late recordings or unrecorded liens that a buyer might end up having to be responsible for after the foreclosure sale. Okay, so as a buyer at the courthouse steps, there are risks. Okay, right?
So how do you do the due diligence?
Well, that's where you have to find.
Title
There is
company charges
no
money.
100%, but for the most part, a preliminary title report is pretty good protection. You need to have a title report done to the date of the sale. So usually, if I have an investor and I have investors who go to the courthouse steps in the morning, we call the title company and say, hey, can you timestamp this prelim by this morning? So they will search up to this morning, right? Up to like 10 o'clock. But then sometimes some things are missed throughout the day, or something is missed. There's no 100%. Okay, guys? That's why there's a risk. But for the most part, most buyers at the courthouse steps will only buy the first position, because if Vicas bids on it and it's the first position, then second, third, and fourth lender will usually bid also. Otherwise, they get wiped out. Okay, so when you buy the first position, if the lender who's foreclosing, and usually it's the first position, then any liens after that gets wiped out. Okay, so I'll address more questions later about that, but know the process. Okay, so that's what the buyers at the auction does. That's 3 months and 21 days later. Okay, guys. Okay. So as a seller, as an owner of the property, the previous buyer of the property, right? You want to try and save the property to save your credit, number one, so you don't have a foreclosure, because that lasts 7 to 10 years on your credit report. And also any potential equity that might be there, right? Okay, so if there's any potential equity. Okay. But some people, they have no equity, right? It's a $2 million property. They owe $3 million, right? Because they've been late for like the last 6 to 12 months. They haven't paid the mortgage or whatever. They borrowed too much, or it was worth $3 million. It was worth $4 million. Now it's only worth $2 million, because there are some homes that have gone down in value the last couple of years, right? We're seeing short sales in the MLS. There's a way for you to search foreclosures, NODs, trustee sales, okay, bank-owned properties or REOs. There's a way. Call your tech support, and they can show you how to do that. Or if the next time I see you guys in a live class, I can show you how to do that. I can do it in Paragon. If you belong to Silvar, right? There is a way It's just a little different. Okay, call your tech support and ask them, hey, how do you find foreclosures on the MLS? Okay, there's a function in there where it can tell you what type of listing it is. Okay, so now let's talk about what is a short sale, right? Right. Okay. So here, right, on one of the things, right, impact of short sales and foreclosures on credit report. This is in one of the things here, right? Short sale info, short sale Q&A, short sales. Okay, you guys read this. Okay, I'll attach it on the recording, but I'm gonna leave it up to you. What is a short sale? Remember that $2 million property that was worth $3 million? That's the loan, right? Well, as an agent, you want to take on these foreclosure properties. So one of the questions we ask the client is, how much do you own the house? Oh, so we owe $3 million. The value is $2 million, let's say. How do we do that? Well, this is where as a listing agent, we will help them negotiate with the bank, or we can talk to the bank and say, hey, this house is only worth $2 million. You know, we want to do a regular sale, because if you foreclose on the property, you'll end up with less than $2 million, right? Because the investors are going to bid less, right? And you don't want the house back, right? Because remember, if the investors don't bid, because it's, because the bank minimum bid is going to be $3 million, because that's what the loan balance is, right? The investors know it's only worth $2 million, so why would they bid $3 million on a property that's worth $2 million, right? So what ends up happening in that case is the bank takes the house back, and it becomes a bank-owned property or an REO. A bank does not need another REO, because what they end up having to do is, when the bank takes the house back, they cannot loan that money out. Okay, so this is banking regulations. We're not going to talk about that, but bottom line is, if they have a non-performing asset like a $3 million bank-owned property, right? Because that's what it is. Okay, and now it's only worth $2 million. They can't loan out that $3 million, right? Because it's not liquid. It's bad on their books. Banks don't want foreclosed homes. They'd rather do a short sale if they can see there's a hardship. But if Stephen Curry decides to do a short sale on his Atherton house because it's no longer worth $40 million, it's now only worth $35 million, right? He tries to do a short sale, the bank's probably going to say, nope, you can afford to pay us the $40 million, because that's what you borrowed from us. If not, we're going to go after you, right? Well, here's the thing. If the loan was an original loan, right, the bank can only take the house back. They cannot go after Stephen Curry's, other money to get paid. Okay, so on the handouts, as far as how the short sales foreclosures affect your credit, there's gonna be some things in there that you guys can read. We'll talk more about this. Okay, what I'll try and do, maybe in the academy, we'll do a formal class on this. Okay, because this is something that's gonna start to happen now, right? Because in some areas, people have bought houses in the last year or 2 or 3 years, and now it's worth less, right? Especially when there's some areas where there's there's too much inventory, right? So there are some areas like that, even in the Bay Area. Okay, and if you guys stick around till the end, I'll show you guys, as far as the East Bay numbers look like. Okay. And then you guys can do the same thing for Santa Clara, San Mateo counties, or whatever counties you guys work out of. Okay, you guys can do this through the MLS, but also through your title company. Okay, so talk to your title company and say, hey, do you guys have information on this? They do. Okay, but if you want a resource, Foreclosure Radar is one of the companies out there. Okay, there's several others, but that's just one of the resources. Okay, so hopefully you guys will read these 8 attachments on my next email. Okay, or if you have access to OC Title, go to this doc toolbox and you guys can see it. Okay, Sonia, question.
Hi, great. So my question is
Yes.
that if the seller or the owner, do they need a lawyer representation in this process during the foreclosure with the bank, or they can represent themselves?
Well, no, they can represent themselves, or there are lawyers out there who will help negotiate. Remember, we just help contact the bank. We don't
Okay.
negotiate. We're going to give them these handouts, right? Understanding the foreclosure process. You guys see this, right?
Mhm.
the timeline, right? Foreclosure and short sale information, right? This is the glossary, okay? Impact of short sales, on your credit reports, right? If they have an FHA loan, there's a website, okay, that they can go to, right?
Okay.
And then short sales, why do banks do short sales? Here are some reasons, okay,
Mhm.
right? Okay. Uh, and then what is a short sale? Q&A, right? What if I owe what if I owe what my home is worth, right? Like you owe 3 million, but it's only worth 2 million, right? Again, how will it affect my credit? Okay.
Mhm.
So all of this is on that site at OC Title, but I'll give this to you guys in case you don't have it yet. Okay. What is the difference between short sale and a bank-owned REO? As a buyer, when should I buy it? Right? As a short sale, or should I wait at the courthouse steps? If you buy it as a short sale, then you have some protection. As a REO, there's to me it's less protection, right? But again, I'll let you guys review this, and then we can talk more about it at another time, or you can have a conversation one-on-one. Okay?
Greg, I have a follow-up question. It's very quick. So,
Yeah.
what are the limitations of an agent in this process? What are our limitations when we want to help our clients?
Well, our limitation is that we can't tell them, like what's really going to. We can't guarantee anything, right?
Mhm.
We act as if we're just a regular agent selling the house. Our job is to sell the property for them,
Okay,
right? That's it.
that's it.
Yeah. Now, if they say, well, can you help me negotiate with the bank with my, loss mitigation? I mean, with my modification, we don't do that,
Okay.
right? We tell them, okay, this is what, contact your bank, because the bank is going to need authorization from, some of the paperwork is going to say, I, Mr. Seller, give my agent authorization to talk to the bank. Me, Mr. Owner, gives the bank authorization to talk to my agent about the short sale, or, just conversation about the loan, right? But as
Okay.
far as negotiating anything with the bank, that's between them and the bank or a lawyer.
Do we
Okay.
have to do any extra paperwork, like in
Yes.
terms of we
Yeah.
do it? Okay.
Yeah. There's extra paperwork. Um, I think there's something in here, but don't worry about that now. So
Okay.
if you guys have something, come see me, come talk to me, talk to your manager, and we'll help you through the process. Okay. So if you
Okay.
contact someone and says, hey, I'm behind payments, what are my options? Bring us in. We'll coach you through it, or we'll even do a Zoom meeting with the client, and then at least give them some options, and then refer them to probably to an attorney. Right. Some of us have access to um, legal services of America.
Mhm.
We can refer them to them, and they can guide them through the process. But usually, most of the handouts that I've shown you guys today is enough for them to at least get their feet wet to understand the process, right? So
Okay.
if they're behind, question is, do they have equity left over that you can try and save? Do they want to save their credit? A short sale is better than a foreclosure. Okay. If there's equity to be saved, great. You can save their credit. But if people says, hey, I want to stay here as long as I can, I don't want to sell it. I owe 3 million. It's the value is 2 million. I'm gonna waiting for the bank to kick me out. There are people like that, right? And in California, there are some protection for them, right? Because in California, we don't, the legislators don't want people to be homeless, so there will be some protection for potential owners or sellers, previous buyers, right? Yeah, California people, legislators don't want people to be homeless. So, you know, once the bank owns it, right? This is now where other agents, what we call REO agents, right? We have a couple agents. David Azimi is one of them, right? Um, you know, we have a couple agents who became REO agents, right? Where they contact the bank and say, "Hey, we want to help you liquidate your bank-owned properties." There's another process for that. Okay, if you want to do that, it's a longer process. As a newer agent, you know, you may not want to do that, but because they do have contacts for that, because there's not enough REO listings right now. They already have contacts with other, previous REO agents. In 2007 to 2012, there was a lot of REOs, bank owns. There's a lot of agents who are still in the business today who have relationships with the bank already. But you can certainly contact a bank. You can go to Chase, find out who do you need to talk to, and the asset manager and try to see if you can get listings from them, but that's a longer process. It's harder than expired or for sale by owner. It's harder than door knocking, but it can be done. Okay, but there's just not enough opportunities right now, and I'll show you guys the numbers shortly. Okay, so get to where is it at? Yeah, so get with Orange Coast Title or your title rep. They have information like this, but this is the most comprehensive that I have found so far. Okay, so I'll send out all these handouts. Okay, and like I said, if you have access to OC Title, you guys have access to it right now. Okay, so go to basically, like I said, go to more tools. Right, like I said, you guys can contact Katie. Right, there's her number. Right, more tools, and then go to document toolbox. Okay, and then go to foreclosure and short sale info. Okay, and you'll see this. Right now, if you guys notice, there's a lot of stuff on the toolbox. Consumer guides, laws and propositions, 13, 19, 8, right? All that, right? Educational materials. There's a lot of stuff in here, guys. I'll leave it up to you guys to go through it. Just like we have a lot of stuff at the Intero Academy, your hub, okay, at the Intero, okay, hub.intero.com, right? And also at our Intero YouTube channel. There's tons of information out there. You just got to ask, okay? So I'm going to remove my screen here. All right. Questions so far about the foreclosure process, about doing a short sale. Like I said, doing a short sale right now, yeah, when you have one, come talk to us, because if I explain to you how the short sale is and all that, there's information on those on those handouts I'll be sending, right, at the OC Title. That'll explain how short sale works. Okay, but until you actually have one, until you walk through it, right, it's not gonna make sense too much yet. So read the materials, get your feet wet, and try to understand it. YouTube channel, okay. Some of you guys who have YouTube, right? Especially if you have YouTube Premium, no commercials, just put in short sales in California, foreclosures in California, foreclosure process, short sale process in California. There are previous other agents who've done videos on it. You might be able to find mine, but there's tons of stuff in there. Okay, just make sure it's California based. There are some lawyers who's done videos on this, and you can use them as resources just to learn. And once you learn something, once you're like dangerous enough, come see me and make sure we have the full understanding. Okay? So, questions, comments about the foreclosure process, why you should do it, or how to avoid it, right? As agents, what we can do to help sellers, right? We can do, pre-foreclosure, right? Before the 90 days, right? Okay. So, questions on the foreclosure process or anything what we've talked about so far?
I got a question.
Yes, Prabjot.
Yeah, so it's regarding one of the clients. So it's a little bit tricky story actually. So our owner who owns that property is deceased, and so his wife, she's not on a title.
Yeah.
And she's living in that property, and she said she's gonna stay there as soon as like a bank said like you cannot stay here anymore. So
Okay.
she already got the notice of default, but nothing else.
Okay. All right. Let me address that shortly. Okay. But any other questions regarding the foreclosure timeline? Notice of default, 90 days, and then 21 days. You'll hear that. 3 months and 21 days. That's what you'll hear with the foreclosure process in California. Minimum 3 months, minimum 21 days. Okay? Right? And there are ways to postpone the sale date. There are, once a notice of default is filed, right, that continues forever until they withdraw the notice of default. So once you make up the payments, make sure you tell your clients, hey, make sure they file a withdrawal of that notice of default. Because once that notice of default is filed and then they stop the sale date, they don't have to wait 3 more months. They can just wait another 21 days to post up a new sale date. Okay? So in case you guys are in this position, right, know how to protect yourself. That's where sometimes you need a lawyer. Some people will try to file bankruptcy to stop a sale date. Okay, that works also. So that's why sometimes there are lawyers out there, bankruptcy lawyers, that will mail to distressed sellers and say, hey, we can stop the sale for you. Okay? All right. So any questions whatsoever? I muted some of you guys because there was some background noise. But is there any other specific questions regarding the foreclosure? General question about these short sales, why you should do it, how to help your clients, before I answer Prabjot's question outside the recording.
I have
So,
one
questions?
question.
Yes, Blaze.
So, and another option could be forbearance plan, right? Just contact
Yes,
your
the
bank.
loan modification, right?
The loan modification, yeah.
Yeah. You can, if the bank can say, hey, you know, you've been behind 12 months, we'll just roll it back on, we can just add it to the principal. That's what we call forbearance or loan modification, however you want to do it. We work out a solution, right? Because remember, the bank doesn't want to foreclose usually, right? Unless they know you have a lot of equity, then they don't care. Or they know that, hey, you got millions of dollars in the bank. Because for you to do a forbearance or to do a short sale, the bank is going to ask you for financial statements and a letter of hardship. Like, why should we work with you? Not only that you stop making payments on it, right? It's, hey, do you have a real hardship? Like, did you lose some money? I mean, did you lose a job? Are you going through a divorce? You know, you borrowed this money from me, Mr. Borrower. Why should I even work with you? We're going to punish you by having bad credit. That's what they're going to say. Okay. Right. But usually, if you can work something out, like Blaze says, a forbearance, that's another words that you're going to see on that glossary, right? Loan modification, right? It's another word for it. Right. So there's different verbiage that's going to be used. We're going to be thrown out there. Just make sure you read that glossary of terms. Okay. I'm going to send out to you guys. Okay. Okay, Blaze. So yeah, good thought. Yeah. Basically, you find a solution. It's kind of like we're a marriage counselor. Do you want to stay married with the house? Remember, marry the house, date the rate. You guys remember that one, right? Okay, all right. What is it? Is it the interest rate? Okay, what if we lower the interest rate to 4%? Can you afford the house? Right? Some banks will negotiate the interest rate, right, if they can, or if they're willing. Whatever that forbearance, that loan modification is, you try to find a solution. So if you guys are ever behind on your bills, work out a solution. Right? They don't want to foreclose. They don't want to, repossess your car, right? If you're behind on your car payment, right? Or your credit card statement, right? Banks will be willing to renegotiate if they see a light at the end of the tunnel, right? If they don't see a light, or you're messing around with them, they're gonna punish you by ruining your credit, so to speak. All right. So I'm gonna stop my recording here.